On December 7, 1941, the USS Arizona was struck by bombs during the Pearl Harbor attack. The explosion killed 1,177 sailors and officers, and the casualty lists were compiled immediately after. The entire list did not include the name of Captain James Harrison. The Navy's official report only stated, "Missing in action, presumed dead." The family received a terse telegram with a single line confirming he had vanished with the ship, no body, no personal effects. In all the post-war recovery records, there was no shred of evidence proving Harrison died on the deck. His file was closed in an unresolved status, no internal investigation report, no forensic conclusion. Harrison's case became one of the few high-ranking naval officers who disappeared on December 7 without leaving any verifiable trace. In 1986, the U.S. Navy deployed a team of military divers to survey and document the condition of the sunken Arizona. During inspection of the collapsed compartment on the port side, they discovered a heavy iron box hidden behind a charred steel bulkhead. The location and tight wedging ruled out the possibility of it falling freely. When brought up and unsealed, inside was a personal diary and a bundle of documents stamped in red "Confidential." During the handover inventory, Captain Mark Harrison, a naval intelligence officer and grandson of James Harrison, was present. Upon quick cross-check, he realized his grandfather's name was not on the official casualty list. The most valuable evidence was in the diary. The page dated December 6, 1941, had a short note, "Alert withdrawn. If it happens tomorrow, the consequences are unimaginable. Who will take responsibility?" The brief words directly questioned the responsibility within the U.S. command ranks before the Pearl Harbor tragedy. The documents and diary had survived 45 years in the sunken ship's compartment and now became the opening evidence for a new investigation file, reopening all questions about Captain James Harrison's disappearance. Among the documents retrieved from the iron box on the USS Arizona, in addition to Captain Harrison's diary, there was a torn scrap of paper with hastily scribbled words, "Admiral W.R., cancel order." The handwriting differed from the diary pages, possibly a note from someone else, deliberately tucked in alongside. The short line raised questions: what order was canceled, and why was the evidence hidden in the sunken ship's compartment? Upon accessing archived records, Mark discovered another anomaly. The technical report from the Oahu radar station on December 7, 1941, had recorded unidentified aircraft appearing about 130 miles from the island, 50 minutes before the first bombing wave. The report bore the signatures of 2 radar operators. Yet in the post-war hearing records, this detail was completely omitted. The documents presented to Congress and investigation committees only mentioned no early warning. This erasure indicated deliberate intervention to alter the event's narrative. To find more witnesses, Mark tracked down the list of Arizona survivors and contacted Thomas Caldwell, a chief petty officer who had served directly under Harrison. Meeting at a nursing home in California, Caldwell confirmed that on the morning of December 7, right after the magazine explosion, he had seen Harrison alive. He described, "I saw him being escorted, not by Japanese, 2 Americans in dark blue uniforms, no insignia." Mark asked, "Are you sure? In the chaos, it's easy to be mistaken." Caldwell replied firmly, "No mistake. I served under him for 3 years. I know his build and face well." This testimony contradicted the entire official record, which stated Harrison went missing in the explosion. Caldwell also recalled that after witnessing this, he was lightly wounded and evacuated to a rescue ship. Continuing to comb through data, Mark found Harrison's name appearing in Navy records after December 7, 1941. Next to it was a classified stamp, "Silent Harbor, classified." No explanation, just a code name. This proved Harrison was still tracked in the system after the presumed date of his death. The scattered pieces began to suggest a pattern. Radar had detected enemy aircraft, but was erased from records. A key order from an admiral was canceled right before the attack. A witness confirmed Harrison was escorted by men in American uniforms. And finally, classified records showed his name persisting under a special alias. All pointed to Harrison's disappearance not being a random result of the explosion, but tied to an organized chain of actions to keep him out of the public eye. After obtaining Chief Petty Officer Caldwell's testimony, Mark expanded his search for witnesses present at Pearl Harbor on the morning of December 7, 1941. In the list of military medical personnel mobilized that day, he noted a name appearing sporadically in casualty evacuation reports: civilian volunteer nurse of Hawaiian descent, Keiko Nakamura. At the time, she was only 22, and had been called up to assist at a field aid station set up right by the harbor. Mark visited her son's home in suburban Honolulu. Nakamura, now over 60, still had a sharp memory. When Mark introduced himself as Captain Harrison's grandson, she nodded immediately. "I remember," tall man graying hair. He was brought into the temporary aid station that morning, not badly burned like many others, just a gash on his forehead and some scrapes on his arms. Mark asked, "Are you certain it was James Harrison?" Nakamura didn't hesitate. "I saw the name tag on his shirt, Harrison." Even injured, his eyes were alert, but the strange thing was he wasn't treated long. 2 American soldiers stood guard, not in standard uniforms, just dark blue, guns holstered. They never took their eyes off him. According to her, Harrison stayed in the aid station for less than 2 hours. As the sun set, a small truck arrived. Nakamura overheard the medical officer being ordered to hand him over. Minutes later, Harrison was taken away, escorted by the 2 guards. He had minor injuries, but someone took him away that very night. Mark immediately checked the December 1941 aid station records, but in the military medical archives, the entire file for the Pearl Harbor aid station that month was gone. The months before and after were there, only December 1941 was completely empty. This void aligned with Nakamura's account, bolstering the hypothesis that Harrison had been secretly removed, and all medical evidence erased. Nakamura remembered one other detail. Before being taken away, Harrison whispered to a medic, "Tell my family I'm alive." But a guard immediately barked at him to be silent, and dragged him off. Cross-referenced with what Caldwell had said, Nakamura's testimony further solidified the possibility that Harrison did not die in the explosion, but became a controlled subject. One witness saw him escorted off the ship, another confirmed he entered the aid station and left with American forces that night. Additionally, the complete disappearance of the December medical records indicated intervention to erase traces. All this formed a new chain of evidence. Harrison did not perish in the moment the Arizona burned, but was held back, given first aid, then removed from the scene under secrecy, and from that moment, his name appeared under the alias Silent Harbor in classified Navy files. The case now extended beyond a personal disappearance. It revealed a systematic cover-up operation, starting from the morning of December 7th, and lasting for decades. After leaving Honolulu, Mark returned to the family home in San Diego. The house had been preserved since his father's death, with grandfather James Harrison's belongings still untouched in the attic. In family stories, they often mentioned a wooden trunk that grandmother had never opened. Mark decided to search. In the dusty attic corner, the dark wooden trunk was wedged between old crates. The lock was rusted but still sealed with a Navy wax stamp. Mark pried it with pliers. The latch broke, and the lid sprang open. Inside was a neatly folded Navy uniform, still carrying the musty scent of time. Beside it was a small box of medals, Purple Heart, Navy Cross, and a few personal mementos. Most importantly, there was a stack of papers tucked into the uniform's pocket. It was a copy of the operations order, dated December 6, 1941, stamped Pacific Fleet. The order clearly stated that the full base alert had been withdrawn at 8 p.m. that evening. On the margin was Harrison's handwritten note: "Warning sent to Washington, no response. Alert canceled from High Command." Mark held the paper, murmuring. He prepared a report but never sent it. In the trunk was also an envelope, a letter to Harrison's wife in hasty handwriting, but the letter was torn in half afterward. The remaining part only read, "If I die, ask about the morning order." The line stopped abruptly, as if Harrison didn't want anyone else to read the full letter or was forced to destroy the rest. Finding the operations order copy and the unfinished letter made the case clearer. Harrison had known part of the truth beforehand. He realized the alert had been canceled from High Command, and tried to send a warning but was blocked. Mark repacked everything, photographed it, and cross-referenced with the existing evidence. Witness Caldwell confirmed Harrison was escorted off the ship. Nurse Nakamura said he was taken to the aid station and vanished that night. Now the family trunk added direct proof. Harrison had tried to resist, written a letter, annotated the operations order, but both Washington and local command stayed silent. The artifacts in the trunk showed he had prepared a dossier to expose it, but everything was halted on the morning of December 7th. The trunk's existence proved he had left a trail in the family, waiting to be found. Mark realized this was no longer scattered details. The Oahu radar erased from records, the alert order canceled, Harrison escorted away at the battlefield, the December 1941 aid station files missing, and now the unsent letter. All pointed to one thing: high-level intervention, and Harrison became someone who knew too much. The documents from the family trunk showed Harrison had recognized the irregularity right before December 7th. But Mark knew he couldn't uncover the full truth alone. He approached Rachel Adams, an investigative journalist who had collaborated on several hidden military history cases. Rachel had deep connections in archives and a network of sources capable of opening doors closed for decades. Mark showed her the operations order copy with Harrison's handwriting. Rachel read it carefully, then said, "If he explicitly noted the alert was canceled from high command, there must be supporting documents. No one does that without leaving an administrative trail." They started at the National Archives in Maryland. After hours of searching, Rachel found a faint reference in the partially declassified classified documents catalog. Silent Harbor Project, 1941. The file was numbered out of sequence, as if deliberately buried in an obscure section. Mark used his military clearance to request access. After paperwork, they were brought a file box to the secure reading room. Inside were typed minutes, many pages yellowed. The first page clearly stated, "Silent Harbor Project. Initiated December 1941. The objective below, ensure no one discloses command failure at Pearl Harbor. Harrison =high-risk subject." Mark flipped through the pages. It listed emergency measures for individuals deemed likely to reveal the alert withdrawal. Next to Harrison's name in the adjacent column, immediate containment required. All external communications to be blocked. What stunned Mark and Rachel was a document dated December 8, 1941, just one day after the attack. In the corner, a red top SE secret stamp. The content was brief: Harrison neutralized. Rachel whispered, "They stated it plainly. No euphemism," meaning he was officially eliminated. Mark stared at the line, each word searing into his memory. It confirmed what Caldwell and Nakamura had said. Harrison survived the Arizona's explosion, but was seen as a threat and handled under utmost secrecy. Subsequent pages revealed the scope of Project Silent Harbor. One section read, "Radar warnings or alert cancellation orders to be classified as risks. Absolute information control required to maintain surprise attack narrative." A marginal note indicated at least 6 witnesses placed under surveillance. Mark and Rachel exchanged glances. Mark said, "This isn't just about Harrison, it's a full erasure campaign." Rachel replied, "And it started right after December 7th, meaning the cover-up was pre-planned." They continued turning pages. A typed table listed sensitive sources in Hawaii military medicine. At the bottom, Rachel spotted a name, Nakamura, medical volunteer. Next to it, under surveillance. December 41 aid station records processed. Nakamura's statement about the missing aid station files was now verified. The records were erased under Silent Harbor orders. In the final section of the file, a document signed by a high-ranking officer whose name was redacted to initials. This matched the letters on the note from the iron box, Admiral W.R., cancel order. This document confirmed, the full base alert on the evening of December 6 had been canceled to avoid panic and interfere with diplomatic negotiations. Thus the full picture emerged. Captain Harrison knew the alert had been withdrawn, wrote a report, and became someone who had to be contained. On December 8, official records confirmed he had been neutralized. Rachel closed the file, voice low. "Mark, if we release this, it will shake the official history of Pearl Harbor." Mark replied, "That's exactly why they hid it for 45 years. The documents in the box now connected systematically with the ultra-classified archives. The diary, notes, witness statements, and now administrative proof, all pointed to one truth. James Harrison was removed from the Arizona alive, but later eliminated to ensure a single official story, that Pearl Harbor was a completely surprise attack, with no U.S. fault." After leaving the National Archives, Rachel decided to test the waters by going public with partial information. She drafted a short article on a defense news site, stating only that radar at Oahu had detected signs of unidentified aircraft nearly an hour before Japanese bombs fell on Pearl Harbor. but this report never appeared in post-war hearing records. Rachel didn't mention Harrison or the Silent Harbor project, just asked, why did the early warning evidence disappear? The piece immediately drew attention. Some veterans and historians voiced support, claiming they had heard of the radar warning but found no official proof. Local Hawaii media republished it. Some TV channels even opened discussions, but less than 2 days later, something unusual happened. Rachel's office in Washington was broken into. The computer hard drive storing all investigation data was gone. No signs of forced entry, no other items taken. When police arrived, they initially ruled it a property theft, but Mark and Rachel knew it was targeted at the Pearl Harbor files. No thief would take only computer data and leave cash and valuables behind. That same evening, Mark received a call from an anonymous number, a raspy, even, cold male voice. Your grandfather's story has been buried for 45 years, don't dig it up. The call ended immediately, leaving no trace. Before he could process it, the next morning Mark found an envelope delivered to his door. No sender address, just his name in black ink. Inside was a bank safe deposit box key from Hawaii, the type still used since the 1940s, and a small scrap of paper with a short line. Ask about December 6th briefing. Mark showed it to Rachel right away. She nodded urgently. December 6th is when the alert was canceled. If there's material in the safe, it could reveal who issued the order. The note and key suggested a new lead, but at the same time, the break-in and threat call showed someone was still monitoring every step of the investigation. Within less than a week, the chain of events unfolded. The test article published, the office broken into, data vanished, direct threat, and finally the mysterious key, all proved that what Mark and Rachel held was not just harmless historical details, but the tip of a secret someone still wanted buried forever. The clue from the Hawaii safe deposit box key made Mark realize he needed help from those who had worked in the intelligence system. An old military contact introduced him to Thomas Blake, a retired former agent of the Office of Naval Intelligence, ONI, now maintaining his own network. Their meeting took place in a quiet San Diego coffee shop. Blake, in his 70s, lean, with eyes still sharp, he got straight to the point, placing a brown envelope on the table. Inside was a copy of a telegram dated December 6, 1941, sent from Pearl Harbor to the Navy Department in Washington. The header read, Priority, Immediate. The sender Captain James Harrison, USS Arizona. The message, Oahu radar detected unusual activity. Request base-wide alert status be maintained. Local commander canceled warning. Request Washington confirmation. Below, a red stamp clearly marked received. Navy Dept. December 6, 1941. 21:15. Blake looked at Mark and said slowly, they can't say they didn't know. The telegram was on their desk. This meant the highest levels in Washington had received Harrison's warning but took no action. Instead, the next morning, the entire base was caught off guard by the attack. Mark asked about the document's origin. Blake gave a faint smile. Years ago, I served in a team reviewing classified files. I copied some documents for insurance. Most were never needed, except this one. Blake didn't stop there. He pulled out a faded black and white photo printed from original film. The caption on the film's edge noted it was taken inside a military warehouse in Hawaii on December 8, 1941. The image was blurry, but showed a man in a white shirt, hands tied, flanked by 2 guards. Blake pointed at the face in the photo. Harrison. No mistake. This was taken by a civilian employee who worked with ONI. He disappeared shortly after sending the film out, but I kept the print. Mark held the photo, comparing it to his grandfather's image in the family album. It was indeed James Harrison. The timing was 2 days after the Arizona sank, when official records claimed he was missing in action. Yet here was proof he was detained. Blake explained that ONI had collected fragments of information about control measures for sensitive personnel, but the Silent Harbor project was completely sealed afterward, its records locked away. Many colleagues tried to investigate, then suddenly got transferred or discharged early. We knew something big was going on, but no one dared touch it. Mark asked, why keep these until now? Blake replied curtly, because I knew one day someone from his family would come looking, and because the truth can't stay buried forever. The evidence Blake provided aligned with prior information, the canceled alert, witnesses seeing Harrison being escorted, the infirmary confirming he was alive. Silent Harbor records noting, neutralized. Now the telegram stamped received proved Washington couldn't claim ignorance, and the blurry photo showed Harrison was detained after December 8. It all pointed to one thing: James Harrison's disappearance wasn't due to the Japanese attack, but at the hands of Americans, and the order came from the highest levels in Washington. After their first meeting, Mark arranged a private follow-up with Thomas Blake to hear everything he knew. They chose a small hotel room in San Diego, away from prying eyes. Blake brought a thin, unmarked file secured with a rubber band. He set it on the table, looking at Mark for a long moment before speaking. "There are things I haven't been able to tell anyone for 40 years. But now, with the evidence you've found, there's no reason to stay silent anymore." Mark nodded. "Start from the beginning." Blake took a drag from his cigarette, then said slowly, "The group of admirals behind Silent Harbor didn't want Pearl Harbor to be fully secure. They knew Japan would strike sooner or later. They left the base vulnerable because a devastating blow would sway Congress and the American public against opposing the war. In their eyes, it was the only way to pull America into the fight." Mark frowned. "You're saying they deliberately let Pearl Harbor be attacked?" Blake nodded. "Exactly. Not all the commanders, but a small group. They called it Silent Harbor, a silent harbor in terms of warnings and defenses. They controlled information, canceled alerts, and waited for the attack to happen." Blake pulled an old typewritten sheet from the file. The header read, "Internal Risk Assessment, December 1941. Under Internal Risk Subjects, it listed Captain James Harrison, USS Arizona. Sent telegram opposing alert cancellation. High risk of external disclosure. Recommend immediate control." Harrison was one of the few on-site commanders who disagreed with canceling the alert. He sent a telegram straight to Washington, demanding the alert be maintained, and noting radar had detected unidentified aircraft. That telegram was stamped received. You've seen the copy. No one can say they didn't know. But that's when Harrison was marked as an internal risk. Mark clenched his fists. "And that's why my grandfather disappeared." Blake continued, his voice low. "On December 8, after the raid, I was a young ONI officer. I was ordered to assist in transferring a special prisoners from Pearl Harbor to a military warehouse on the island. When I got there, I realized it was Harrison. He was slightly injured but alert, hands tied, with 2 guards. I've never forgotten the look in his eyes, searching for someone who might listen." Mark asked immediately, "Did you interact with him?" Blake nodded. "Briefly. When I approached to check the paperwork, he said quietly, so only I could hear, 'Tell them the truth. The radar saw it. The alert was canceled. Washington knew. I couldn't respond. My superiors were watching, and I just signed the transfer log.' After that, he was taken to a temporary detention site we called Facility 12. It didn't exist on any map." Mark breathed heavily. "So you saw it with your own eyes?" Blake confirmed. "Yes, I wasn't directly involved in his detention or what followed, but I know Harrison didn't die on the Arizona. He was taken alive, moved, and later the records said neutralized." Blake added that years after the war, when he tried to access Facility 12's records, they had all been destroyed. Those who served there were reassigned under unusual circumstances or stayed silent until their deaths. "You have to understand." Blake looked directly at Mark. "Silent Harbor wasn't just about covering up one person. It was a campaign to protect a political decision, to let America be attacked to gain public support for the war. Harrison, a respected captain who opposed them with evidence in hand, was their biggest threat. They couldn't let him remain outside their control." Mark stayed silent, letting Blake continue. "I still remember that day when the vehicle carrying Harrison left the warehouse. A senior officer told me, 'Never mention this name again. To the world he died with the Arizona.' I knew it was an order, but deep down, I knew I'd witnessed one of the greatest crimes in naval history." Blake closed the file, leaving only the copied telegram and the typewritten sheet listing Harrison as an internal risk. He said slowly, "I kept these to wait for someone brave enough to carry on. Now I'm giving them to you. But be careful, those who protected Silent Harbor, or their descendants, still hold power." With Blake's account, the picture became clearer. A group of admirals deliberately canceled alerts to pave the way for the attack. Harrison objected and sent a telegram, then was detained and eliminated. The evidence Mark held was no longer a theory. It was confirmation from a direct witness. Among the documents Mark found in the family chest was a yellowed diary. Its final pages, densely written near December 6, 1941. Reading it, he realized it wasn't just personal notes, but a field report, each line written as evidence for whoever came after. The entry for December 6, 41 began with a clear detail. Oahu radar reported unusual activity. Signal band from the north, not matching regular flight paths. Distance 130 nautical miles, heading straight for the island. Harrison noted he immediately ordered the duty officer to verify. In the diary, he described calling the fleet commander directly via a secure line. The response was quoted verbatim, "It's just a drill, cancel the alert." The next lines were written in sharp, hurried strokes. I objected. We've had false alarms before, but this signal was clear. It can't be called a drill. Harrison recorded that he requested written confirmation. Tucked into the same page, Mark found a faxed appendix. The paper was faded, but legible. Confidential. Supplementary order. December 6, 1941. At the bottom was a handwritten signature from an admiral then serving as Deputy Fleet Chief of Staff, who later became Secretary of Defense in the 1950s. The signature was unmistakable. The document's text was a single line, "All alerts cancelled, by direct order." This meant Harrison not only heard the alert cancellation over the phone, but also had written confirmation issued that day, signed by a figure who later held the highest military office. In the diary, Harrison wrote, "I requested a telegram be sent to Washington. Sent. No response received." This matched the document Blake gave Mark. The telegram stamped received at the Navy Department. Harrison didn't know his message had reached senior officials' desks. He also noted a detail, "Final call, the commander's voice cold. If something happens, the responsibility is mine. You don't need to interfere anymore." Below this, Harrison wrote briefly, "An order against conscience, but I must record it for future evidence." Reading these pages, Mark saw they aligned perfectly with Blake's account. Harrison didn't stay silent. He reported the radar anomaly, opposed the alert cancellation, and sent a telegram to Washington. All were backed by evidence: the diary, the telegram, and the fax with the admiral's signature, who later became Secretary of Defense. This evidence turned the story from rumor to fact. It proved that on December 6, 1941, there was an early warning, internal disputes, and a high-level decision to suppress all alerts. Harrison was the only one who documented, objected, and then vanished from official history. In the final pages of December 6, Harrison wrote a short, heavy sentence, "If I'm gone, ask about this morning's order." It was the same message left in the unsent letter to his wife, found in the chest. Now Mark understood it was his grandfather's final message, aimed directly at the events of December 6, 1941. The day warnings were deliberately silenced, to pave the way for the next day's tragedy. After confirming the facts with the signature of the admiral who became Secretary of Defense, Mark and Rachel knew they held dangerously critical pieces, but they didn't expect the reaction to come so quickly. One morning, as Mark approached his car, he noticed an odd smell of fuel. A gut feeling led him to inspect closely. Under the car, the wiring to the battery had been tampered with. Drawing on his Navy experience, Mark recognized a rigged ignition device. He immediately disconnected the fuse and called a bomb disposal unit. The result confirmed a small explosive attached to the ignition system, set to detonate upon starting the car. That same day, Rachel discovered all electronic files on her personal storage system had been wiped. A backup drive vanished during an office break-in, and cloud data was accessed unauthorizedly. The only copies left were a few paper printouts Mark had kept separately. That evening, Mark's phone rang. A steady, heavy male voice spoke without introduction. "Harrison doesn't exist in history. Don't follow him." The call cut off, leaving no trace. Rachel looked at Mark, her face tense. "They've decided to act. We're running out of time." Mark pulled out Harrison's diary, hoping for more clues. Flipping to the last page, he noticed small symbols in the margins he hadn't seen before. A mix of numbers and letters. At first he thought they were ink errors, but cross-referencing other pages revealed they formed a cipher. He arranged them and compared them to the note, "Ask about December 6 briefing" from the mysterious envelope. The symbols matched the format of an old Hawaii bank safe deposit box code. Harrison's diary wasn't just a record, it held a cipher pointing to another hiding place. Mark handed the paper to Rachel. She nodded. "So the key sent to your house and the code in the diary are a pair. The message is clear. Harrison hid evidence in Hawaii." The final piece clicked. While they were being watched, Threatened, and their documents erased, Harrison had left his grandson the only path to the truth. The Hawaii safe deposit box was now their sole target. But it also meant those guarding this secret would stop at nothing to keep them from reaching it. Before heading to Hawaii, Mark decided to find another ally who could help him deal with those tracking him. Rachel introduced him to Carter Reed, a retired CIA officer now living quietly in Virginia. Reed had been involved in numerous covert operations during the early Cold War, known among investigative journalists as a rare witness willing to reveal hidden activities. The meeting took place in a discreetly rented room. Reed, about 70, with white hair and sharp eyes, sat down and asked bluntly, "Are you James Harrison's grandson?" Mark nodded. Reed paused, then pulled out an old yellowed envelope with a torn seal and slid it toward Mark. 45 years ago, I received this. Sender, Captain James Harrison. Mark opened it. Inside was a copy of a radar report from December 6, 1941, with a handwritten note. Unidentified aircraft. Recommend maintaining alert. Order cancelled. Washington needs to know. This was the second copy of the report Harrison had tried to send, proving he not only sent an official telegram, but also sought another way to ensure the information reached those outside. Reed explained, "I was a young officer then, tasked with reviewing documents sent through secure channels. This envelope appeared in the 1942 files, with no explanation of its origin. But internally, we were ordered to lock it away, classified as non-disclosable. I didn't understand why at the time. Later, I learned it was part of a campaign codenamed Silent Harbor." Rachel asked, "So the CIA was directly involved?" Reed sighed, "More than involved. Throughout the Cold War, we maintained a veil over Silent Harbor. Any records mentioning the Oahu radar, the canceled alert, or Harrison's name were labeled a national security risk. The official reason was protecting the image of victory in World War II and preventing enemies from exploiting America's political weaknesses. But the truth is, we became tools to conceal a crime." Mark gripped the envelope tightly. "My grandfather knew everything, and he paid with his life." Reed nodded slowly. "Correct. I read an internal report from 1947. It stated Harrison was a witness who needed to be removed from the record. They didn't say killed, but used neutralized." "You know what that means?" Rachel interjected. "Do you know when Silent Harbor ended?" Reed shook his head. "It never ended. When the Cold War escalated, Pearl Harbor documents were reclassified under broader projects. Generations of officers simply followed orders, believing they were protecting the nation. I left the CIA in the 80s, but even now, old colleagues believe what Harrison documented must stay buried." Reed placed his aged hand on the envelope, his voice lowering. "I kept this for decades, knowing someone would need it one day. You're the only one with the right to carry on, because you're a Harrison. But be warned, if you open that safe in Hawaii, those protecting Silent Harbor will know immediately." Mark replied firmly, "They already tried to kill me once. If I stop now, my grandfather's sacrifices will be for nothing. I have no choice." Rachel added, "Then we need you, Mr. Reed. Not just the documents, but your connections. If the CIA covered this up, you surely know how to find records that haven't been destroyed." Reed paused, then nodded. "I'll help, but you must be ready to pay a price. The people behind this never want the truth to surface." With Carter Reed's appearance, Mark and Rachel gained a new ally and crucial evidence: Harrison's envelope sent outside official channels, the authentic radar report, and the admission that the CIA maintained the Silent Harbor cover during the Cold War. Everything pointed to one truth: James Harrison tried to warn, but was silenced by those who were supposed to listen. From the documents and accounts Mark had gathered, the picture of that fateful morning of December 7, 1941, began to take shape. No longer just dry lines in Harrison's log, the truth became vivid through witness fragments. A former rescue team sailor, now over 90, recalled the scene on the Arizona's deck before the ship took a fatal bomb. He said Harrison was still at his command post, calmly ordering the deployment of anti-aircraft guns. Amid the chaos, he heard Harrison shout, "Don't let the fleet go blind," a call to keep the radar active and maintain full vigilance rather than retreat into passivity. But minutes later, the witness recounted, two unfamiliar officers in dark Navy uniforms appeared. They weren't part of the Arizona's regular crew. No one in the team recognized them. They approached Harrison, exchanged brief words, and immediately escorted him away from his command post. In the fire and smoke, few noticed. But the sailor insisted he saw Harrison being dragged off, still shouting, "Don't let the fleet go blind," before disappearing down a corridor on the port side. This detail matched the earlier account of Corporal Caldwell. Now, another witness confirmed the same image. Harrison didn't die when the ship exploded. He was forcibly removed. Mark and Rachel continued tracing surviving documents. In a civilian archive in Hawaii, they found a small notebook belonging to a Navy mechanic, declassified years ago but largely forgotten. The notebook detailed the final days of December 1941. On December 7th, a short but chilling entry read, "Before the bombs hit, I saw the brass take the captain out. Don't know what happened, but he was escorted to a small boat leaving the ship. We were left behind." The mechanic's clumsy handwriting became a second piece of evidence, independent of the spoken testimony. It confirmed Harrison was taken off the Arizona before the bomb pierced the deck, causing the catastrophic explosion. This shattered decades of official records. The captain didn't go missing in combat or die with the ship. He was detained during the battle. Rachel read the lines aloud in heavy silence. If this notebook had been published right after the war, the entire official story would have collapsed. Mark nodded. But it was buried with thousands of other documents because Silent Harbor had to endure. On the morning of December 7, 1941, Pearl Harbor was engulfed in bombs and bullets, but Harrison's story wasn't just the tragedy of a single ship. It was evidence of a deliberate campaign to eliminate a dangerous witness. He shouted to keep the fleet vigilant, then was escorted away by two unfamiliar officers. The mechanic's log confirmed he was taken to a small boat, and from then on, the name James Harrison vanished from all official reports, replaced by the cold line, "Missing in action." This chain of evidence connected everything: the telegram sent to Washington, the canceled alert order, the fax with the admiral's signature, and now the scene of Harrison being dragged away before his crew. It explained why the medical records from December 1941 were erased, why Silent Harbor documents noted neutralized on December 8. Mark looked at the old log pages, his voice firm but not a monologue, a confirmation to Rachel: he didn't vanish, he was taken. And they wanted history to believe he died with the Arizona. The evidence from that fateful morning was now undeniable in their investigation. And with the code left in Harrison's log, the key to the safe in Hawaii became ever more urgent. It might hold the final answers to what Harrison witnessed before he was taken. After finding the code in Harrison's log, and matching it to the mysterious key, Mark and Rachel boarded a flight to Honolulu. The bank where the safe was registered was an old building on Bishop Street, once part of a wartime military banking system. When they checked the serial number, the bank staff confirmed the safe hadn't been opened in decades, but was still in storage. The heavy steel door swung open. The safe box matching the key was brought to the table. Mark turned the lock, the lid popped open, and inside were three pieces of evidence. First, a complete radar report from the Oahu station, stamped December 6, 1941, clearly showing unusual flight paths before the attack. Second, a set of black and white photos capturing the Japanese air fleet approaching Hawaii from a distance, with date and time printed on the film's edge. Third, a handwritten letter from Harrison. They knew in advance: I cannot stay silent. If these documents are opened, it means I no longer have a chance to return. Bring the truth to light. Mark read silently, then folded the letter. Rachel looked at the stack of documents and said softly, "He prepared everything, it's all here." But as they left the storage area, four men in dark suits appeared in the hallway. One flashed an FBI badge, his voice low. "We're ordered to seize all evidence you just retrieved. This is federal property." Mark paused, observing. The badge was shown too quickly, and the serial number didn't match the format he knew. Most telling, the man looked straight at him and said firmly, "Mark, hand over the documents. Don't make trouble for yourself." Rachel whispered to Mark, "You never told them your name." That detail made it clear. Someone in the Navy system had leaked information, providing their itinerary and identity. This wasn't an official encounter, it was an ambush. Mark clutched the bag with the documents and replied coldly, "If you're really FBI, show me a legal seizure warrant." No paper was produced. Instead, one of the men parted his jacket, revealing a pistol grip. The pretense was over. A sharp voice rang out, "Take it back now. Don't let them get away." Mark grabbed Rachel's hand, pulling her toward the emergency exit on the building's side. Footsteps pounded close behind, urgent commands echoing, "Block the door, stop them." They burst onto the street, blending into the bustling crowd of tourists. In the chaos, Mark and Rachel slipped away, leaving the imposters scanning the crowd. The bag of documents remained secure in Mark's hand. Inside were not only the radar report confirming the ignored warning, but also photos of the approaching Japanese fleet, undeniable proof that the cancelled alert wasn't a mistake, but a deliberate decision. And now, with their enemies exposed, Mark knew these documents were why his grandfather disappeared, and why he and Rachel were now the next targets. Mark and Rachel narrowly escaped the pursuit in Honolulu. The documents from the safe, secured in a waterproof suitcase, were immediately taken to a safe location to meet Carter Reed. The former CIA officer was waiting, his eyes sharp as he looked at the yellowed papers and faded black and white photos. "This is the missing piece," Carter said, his hand on the radar report. Harrison wasn't imagining things. He had proof, and that's why he was silenced. Mark showed Carter Harrison's letter. The scrawled ink was still clear. They knew in advance. "I cannot stay silent." Carter fell silent for a moment, then pulled an old sealed envelope with a classified stamp from his jacket. "You need to understand this. Silent Harbor wasn't just a code name. It was a deliberate plan. A group of admirals and senior politicians wanted the attack to happen, because only then would America fully commit to the war." Rachel frowned. "You're saying they intentionally let the fleet be destroyed?" Carter nodded. "Yes. To them it was the price to pay to convince Congress and the public. A necessary shock to end isolationism." Mark clenched his fist. "And my grandfather opposed it. He tried to warn Washington." Carter placed a new set of documents on the table. Inside was a strategic memo for the Silent Harbor project with a list of names. Among the typed names, Mark saw a handwritten note, "Admiral R.K. Harrison threat, neutralize." Rachel scanned it and looked up. This isn't just about ignoring radar. This was a systematic plan. Harrison was seen as a threat because he wouldn't let ships and men die needlessly. Mark flipped further. A document dated December 9, 1941, just 2 days after Pearl Harbor, stated, "Silent Harbor, objective achieved. Public demands war. Subject J.H. handled. Records must remain strictly confidential." Carter sighed. They had the post-event report ready, meaning this wasn't a mistake, it was a plan. Mark looked straight at him. "Who are they?" Carter opened a smaller file, pulling out a typed sheet listing admirals on the Hawaii Command Board. He pointed to one name, Admiral William Ross. Rachel frowned. "That name sounds familiar." Carter nodded. "The father of the current Senator Richard Ross, who sits on the Senate Armed Services Committee. This man has wielded deep influence over U.S. defense policy for 4 decades, and his family has every reason to bury all evidence of the Harrison case." Mark read aloud a note on the file. "RAR, cancel order." He immediately recalled the torn paper found in the metal box from the USS Arizona wreck. The initials matched. Rachel gasped softly. "Admiral W.R. is William Ross." Carter looked at them both, his voice slow. "Correct, and that's the critical twist. The man who canceled the alert on December 6, who saw Harrison as a threat, was the father of one of the most powerful figures today. If the truth comes out, not only will the Navy's honor be shaken, but an entire political dynasty will collapse." The room grew heavy. Mark closed the file and said firmly, "So my grandfather wasn't missing by chance. He was chosen as a sacrifice to protect a plan and a powerful family." Rachel added, "And even now they're still trying to stop it. Those fake FBI agents in Honolulu prove it." Carter nodded. "Those men weren't amateurs. They were sent by the same network that's protected Silent Harbor for 4 decades. He leaned back, his voice cold. "You need to prepare. Once you've touched the Ross family, they'll hunt you to the end." Mark didn't respond, but his gaze on Harrison's file said everything. The real battle was no longer a historical mystery but a direct confrontation with those still holding power today. The Congressional Archive in Washington, D.C., is a place few can access. Mark and Rachel, with the discreet support of Carter Reed, were granted permission to examine a series of undigitized documents from the 1940s. Old wooden boxes stamped with red restricted labels were brought up from the cold basement. Rachel carefully flipped through the files until her eyes landed on a typed transcript titled Joint Congressional Inquiry 1942. She pointed to a bolded section. "Mark, look at this." He leaned in, reading slowly. Subject: Captain James Harrison, USS Arizona. Status: detained for questioning, Naval Intelligence custody. Mark gripped the papers tightly, his face darkening. "This isn't a KIA report. This is a detention order." Rachel nodded. "And it was presented at an official hearing. That means Congress knew about Harrison's detention, but this document was never released." Mark turned to the next pages. Some sections were redacted, but enough remained to provide context. One congressman had asked, "Why would a battleship captain be detained instead of honored?" The recorded response was brief. "National security." Subject showed signs of insubordination, requiring investigation. Rachel frowned. Vague language, no evidence. "But it proves your grandfather didn't die on December 7th. He was detained." Mark kept scanning. At the final page, an approval signature caught his eye. He froze. Disbelief washing over him. "Rachel, do you see this?" On the paper, clearly signed, Douglas McCallan. Rachel was stunned. McCallan, the legendary Pacific general, later hailed as the hero who liberated Manila, buried with honors at Arlington. Every history book reveres him. Mark's voice hardened, but this is his signature approving Harrison's detention. He agreed to make an American captain disappear from the records. Rachel quickly flipped to the attached files. In another typed document, a line read, "Captain Harrison objected to suppression of radar report, classified as potential security breach." Below it was a second confirming signature, also McCallan's. Rachel exclaimed, "So one of America's greatest military icons was directly involved in covering up Silent Harbor." Carter Reed, observing from behind, spoke slowly. "This is the twist we feared. When a national legend is directly tied to Harrison's erasure, revealing the truth is like striking at the foundation of collective memory." Mark clutched the file, his voice dry. "So not only William Ross and his group of admirals, but even the heroes with statues were involved. My grandfather knew, and that's why they silenced him." Rachel looked at Carter. "Can we verify the authenticity of this signature?" Carter nodded. "Yes, I know a handwriting expert who used to work for the National Archives. If confirmed, this will be direct proof that McCallan not only knew, but approved Harrison's detention." Mark slowly placed the papers back on the table, his eyes cold. They wanted to erase him from history, but now the signature of a dead hero will drag them into the light. The air in the sealed room grew heavy. The remaining files only reinforced one truth: James Harrison's disappearance was not a wartime accident, but the result of a high-level conspiracy, shielded by the reputations of men America once revered. Leaving the Congressional Archive with the 1942 hearing transcript, Mark and Rachel knew every step they took was now under scrutiny. They rented an old sedan to avoid being tracked, but just hours later, as the car turned into an empty lot in suburban Maryland, a deafening explosion tore through the night. Flames erupted, engulfing the vehicle's frame. Rachel was thrown into a grassy ditch, dazed but miraculously alive. Mark wasn't in the car at the time. He had stepped out moments earlier to check a tire he suspected had been tampered with. That moment saved his life. Thick smoke and blaring sirens filled the area. Mark rushed to pull Rachel from the flames. They both realized instantly this was no accident. "They know what we're holding," Rachel said, her breath ragged. When local police arrived, Mark knew staying would only lead to a dead end. He took Rachel to a small wooden house on the coast of Oahu, where a Hawaiian Navy veteran named Kanoa Kealoha was waiting. Carter Reed had introduced Kanoa as a surviving witness from 1941 who had served in logistics at Pearl Harbor. In the narrow room thick with the scent of sea salt, Kanoa set a bottle of water before them and whispered, "You two just narrowly escaped a death sentence. But this isn't new. I saw it 45 years ago." Mark looked him in the eye. "What are you saying?" Kanoa pulled a yellowed handwritten note from a wooden drawer, trembling as he placed it on the table. "On December 9, 1941, I and 4 other soldiers were ordered to dig a large pit behind the military depot at Pearl Harbor. They said it was for burying debris from the fire, but when we got there, we saw a truck carrying an iron coffin. It wasn't debris inside." Rachel asked softly, "What was it?" Kanoa lowered his voice. "An American officer. I couldn't see his face clearly. It was covered, but his uniform was intact. The commander with the truck said something I'll never forget. If he were alive, he'd bring down the entire operation." Mark felt his pulse quicken. "Did you know the officer's name?" Kanoa nodded slowly. "One of the soldiers whispered to me as we shoveled dirt, 'That's Harrison.' I didn't want to believe it, but from what they said, I knew he didn't die on the Arizona." Rachel opened her notebook, scribbling every detail. Was there anyone else who saw this? Kanoa gave a sad smile. 5 of us. 3 died in the Korean War. 1 had a work accident in 1952. I'm the only one left. I stayed silent for 4 decades, knowing speaking out meant losing my life. But when I saw you bringing this back up, I knew it was time to talk. Mark placed the congressional transcript he carried in front of Kanoa. We found this document. It clearly states my grandfather was detained for questioning, and it bears the signature of a general who later became a national hero. Your story matches perfectly. Kanoa tapped his finger lightly on the table. You get it now? They didn't just detain him, they eliminated him. But they did it in a way that no one would dare question. Rachel interjected. So Harrison's body was buried somewhere on the island, not in the Arizona's wreckage. Kanoa looked directly at Mark. Exactly, and I remember the coordinates of that plot. But you need to understand, going to find it puts you in the same dangerous position as your grandfather. The roar of a car engine outside interrupted them. Kanoa immediately switched off the light, pulling Mark and Rachel into a small basement. Through a crack in the wooden door, headlights swept across the house. A group of strangers stopped, dressed in dark suits, wearing earpieces. A gruff voice said, "No sign of their car. They're not here yet. Keep moving." As the vehicle's shadow faded, Kanoa exhaled. See, they're still tracking your every move. If I'm right, some of them were part of Silent Harbor back in 1941. They won't let you live in peace. Mark gripped Rachel's hand tightly. We have to go to the site you mentioned. It might be the last place holding evidence of Harrison. Kanoa nodded slightly. I'll take you there, but from now on, be ready for a direct confrontation. Once we dig it up, we'll be unearthing a secret they've kept buried for 45 years. There was no doubt left. The car explosion was just the beginning. The hunt to erase all traces of James Harrison was reigniting, and Mark knew time was running out. News of Mark's car explosion was quickly labeled a technical accident by local police. But Rachel, who was there, documented the scene and sent photos to trusted colleagues in the press. Meanwhile, Mark decided not to wait. He chose the only way to protect himself and his grandfather's legacy: bring the truth to light. A week later, the Washington Chronicle ran a front-page story titled, "Oahu Radar Warned 50 Minutes in Advance, Records Show Suppression from High Command." In the article, Rachel cited parts of the documents from the Hawaii safe and the 1942 congressional transcript, stating clearly that Captain James Harrison was detained for questioning rather than killed in action. The impact was immediate and widespread. National news channels picked up the story, and public outrage erupted with the question, why was a key battleship captain erased from history? Congress couldn't ignore it. Within 48 hours, the Armed Services and Intelligence Committees agreed to hold public hearings, summoning witnesses and demanding answers from the Pentagon. In the large congressional hearing room, Mark stepped forward in front of dozens of cameras for the first time. He didn't hide his identity. On the table before him were copies of Harrison's letter from December 6, 1941, and photographs of the radar reports. His voice was clear. My grandfather didn't die with the USS Arizona. Records show he was detained, and those in power at the time did everything to erase him from history. This is no longer just a family story. This is evidence of a national conspiracy. The lawmakers stirred, many exchanging tense glances. Reporters scribbled furiously. Rachel sat in the back row, watching Mark, while Carter Reed, as an expert witness, confirmed the document's legitimacy. But the real shock was yet to come. As the hearing seemed to conclude, an elderly man unexpectedly requested to speak. Leaning on a cane, dressed in a faded old military uniform, his voice trembled, but resolute. My name is Samuel Ortega. I was a guard at the Oahu Military Depot in December 1941. The room fell silent. Ortega presented an old identification card, verified on the spot by the committee. Then he looked directly at the senators. I swear before Congress, I saw Captain James Harrison brought into the depot on December 9th. He didn't die in the Arizona explosion, he was executed. And the order came from an intelligence officer accompanying him, wearing a U.S. Navy insignia. Murmurs erupted loudly. One senator stood, objecting, this testimony lacks evidence. But Ortega pulled a blurry photograph from his pocket, secretly taken through a gap in the depot door. The black and white image showed a man in uniform, bound, with an execution squad behind him. Ortega continued, I kept this photo my whole life, too afraid to reveal it. But if you want to know where Harrison is, he's in a pit behind the Oahu military depot. I was forced to shovel dirt over him." Mark sat frozen, his heart pounding. This was direct, undeniable confirmation, stronger than any document. Rachel scribbled notes, her hands shaking. Carter Reed gritted his teeth. "If we release this detail, they'll have to open the burial site. And then, no lie can stand." The committee chairman banged the gavel for order. He announced, "The committee will immediately dispatch an independent forensic team to Hawaii to verify Mr. Ortega's claims. Until results are obtained, all records related to Silent Harbor and Captain Harrison will be partially declassified." Outside the hearing room, reporters swarmed Mark. One question rang out: "What do you think about learning your grandfather was executed by Americans?" Mark answered briefly, "My family's pain was hidden for 45 years, but today, the truth is coming to light, and I won't stop until justice is served." That night, national news repeatedly aired Ortega's congressional testimony. The American public was shaken, from families of Arizona victims to World War II veterans. Thousands of letters and calls demanded an excavation at Oahu. Meanwhile, in a darker corner, those behind Silent Harbor, or their powerful descendants, remained active. An internal telegram was sent: "The witness has broken containment, emergency measures needed." Mark and Rachel knew that going public not only opened the path to justice, but also ignited a fiercer new battle. The congressional hearing had barely concluded when a new wave of pressure emerged. Mark was invited to a closed-door meeting, where powerful figures waited, all descendants of officers linked to Silent Harbor. At the center of the table sat Senator Richard Ross, son of Admiral William Ross. Ross spoke coldly. "Mr. Harrison, what you've just made public is shaking the nation. Do you understand what that means?" Mark didn't flinch. "I understand that my grandfather didn't die on the Arizona. He was detained, then erased. This truth must come out." Another senator interjected. "You have a few yellowed papers and an old witness. You plan to rewrite history with that?" Mark placed an old cassette on the table. "Not just papers, this is James Harrison's voice." The room fell deathly silent. Ross frowned. "Where did you get that?" Mark played the tape. A crackling sound filled the air. Then a man's voice, unmistakably Harrison's: "If I don't survive, make this truth known." The radar detected, but the alert was canceled. "If the fleet is slaughtered, it's not just the enemy's fault." When the tape stopped, the air was thick. An elderly senator's voice trembled. "If this gets out, our father's honor will collapse. The monuments at Arlington will become stains." Mark's voice was cold. "What honor is built on killing an honest officer? If you fear collapse, they chose to build those monuments on innocent blood." Ross leaned back, sighing. "You don't understand. Releasing this tape won't just destroy our families, but the military's credibility and the nation's memory. The public isn't ready to accept it." Mark gripped the cassette tightly. "The public has a right to know. How they accept it isn't an excuse to bury the truth." The back and forth led nowhere. Ross left a final warning. "You'll regret this. Harrison was erased from history. Don't follow his path." Mark left the meeting, cassette in hand. Before he could decide his next move, Rachel brought news. The recording had been anonymously sent to major newsrooms' inboxes, with a single line: "Keeping this secret too long was betrayal. This is the truth. Harrison wanted to leave." The next day, America heard the voice of the USS Arizona's captain. His words echoed on news channels. The radar had warned. The alert was canceled, and the tragedy was the result of decisions from above. The reaction was explosive. Victims' families marched to Congress. Veterans organized rallies, and headlines blared, "Captain Harrison's final words." There was no way to deny it. Harrison's words, preserved for 45 years, now rang out as undeniable evidence. They not only confirmed the documents Mark found, but affirmed that Harrison himself knew, before his disappearance, that the truth had to endure. And now his voice forced America to confront the darkness of its past. The political earthquake erupted immediately after Harrison's voice recording went viral. Newspapers across the country ran bold headlines: "Oahu radar warning. Ignored. Arizona captain's final words." Television networks endlessly replayed Harrison's every word. "If I don't survive, bring this truth to light." Public outrage in America exploded. Thousands of veterans and victims' families gathered in front of the Pearl Harbor Memorial, holding banners: "No more lies. Give Harrison his truth." In Washington, crowds flooded the Capitol, demanding a full investigation, not just into Harrison but the entire chain of decisions leading up to December 7, 1941. Mark and Rachel appeared on live television, revealing a portion of never-before declassified documents, an Oahu radar station report noting unidentified aircraft signals at 6:45 a.m., nearly an hour before the bombs fell. In that report, the alert order was marked canceled by higher authority. The words were clear, undeniable. Carter Reed, a respected former CIA officer, confirmed to the press Harrison's cable to Washington on December 6, 1941 was received. No one can say they didn't know. Ignoring the radar signal wasn't a mistake, it was a deliberate decision. A barrage of questions poured in. Who gave the order? Why? Who profited from the attack? As congressional committees began summoning more witnesses, Rachel received a sealed envelope at her newsroom. Inside was a copy of contracts signed in January 1942 between the U.S. Navy and 4 major defense industrial conglomerates. These contracts had been prepared even before Congress officially declared war. Rachel flipped through the pages, eyes widening. Mark, look at these numbers. Orders for dozens of new battleships, thousands of planes, worth billions of dollars, all approved just weeks after Pearl Harbor. And here, the draft contract date, December 2, 1941. Mark stared at the copy, meaning before the bombs even fell, these companies had production plans ready. They knew war was coming, and they needed a shock to make it happen. The press jumped in. The New York Herald published an investigative report, War Industry and the Silence of Pearl Harbor. The article detailed close ties between admirals in the Silent Harbor Project and the leadership of shipbuilding and weapons manufacturing companies. These firms reaped massive profits from America's entry into the war. At a press conference, a reporter asked bluntly, "Was Harrison eliminated to protect strategy or to protect profits?" Mark answered curtly, "Both." Public pressure forced Congress to act swiftly. A special subcommittee was formed with emergency investigative powers, able to summon any individual or organization. The first document they declassified revealed a group of naval officers and officials had met on December 6, 1941, when Harrison sent his radar warning. That meeting included a defense industry advisor, a detail never mentioned in historical records. Rachel stated on television, "This wasn't just negligence, it was a calculated arrangement, where the military and corporations met to ensure a tragedy would pave the way for a massive war industry." Fury spread across the states. In New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago, people marched with signs Harrison knew, "No defense secret can hide the truth." Many World War II veterans sent open letters, demanding James Harrison's honor be restored, recognizing him as someone who sacrificed himself to save his comrades from a political trap. Television channels aired a new interview with Samuel Ortega, a guard from back then. He reaffirmed, "I saw Harrison executed. Afterward we were ordered to stay silent for national security. But now I'm speaking out, because the truth can't be buried any longer." New documents, witness testimonies, and Harrison's voice on the recording formed a seamless chain of evidence. The picture became clear, radar ignored, warnings retracted, a captain who resisted eliminated, and behind it all, a system profiting from war. Mark spoke in a live interview. "My grandfather wrote in his journal, 'If I'm gone, ask about this morning's order.' We asked, and now we have the answer. It wasn't just a military error, it was betrayal." American public opinion was no longer divided, most united in demanding transparency. Families of sailors killed on the USS Arizona began filing collective lawsuits, accusing the government of deliberately concealing the truth and betraying its duty. As Congress announced the next round of hearings, set to include representatives from defense industrial conglomerates, the storm became a hurricane. What had been buried for 45 years was being exposed, triggering an unprecedented political and social upheaval. For Mark, every document, every testimony, every second of the recording not only vindicated Harrison, but turned his mysterious disappearance in 1941 into the most horrific betrayal in U.S. military history. The storm of public outrage, following the series of revelations, could no longer be contained. Declassified files, Harrison's voice recording, and defense industry contracts predating December 7 formed an undeniable web of evidence. Under public pressure, the Justice Department launched a formal criminal investigation, coordinated with the FBI and the Department of Defense. At a Washington press conference, the FBI director declared, "Through analysis of records, witnesses and archives, we conclude Captain James Harrison did not die in the USS Arizona explosion on December 7, 1941. He was detained, held in an Oahu military warehouse, and executed on December 9, 1941, under orders from higher command. This was a deliberate assassination, entirely contrary to military law and the U.S. Constitution." That statement was the final hammer blow, shattering a 4-decade wall of silence. The press ran headlines: FBI confirms, Harrison executed, not killed in action. The Special Congressional Committee soon issued its findings. Several surviving officers from the Silent Harbor Project were indicted for conspiracy to commit murder and conceal the truth in war records. Though elderly, they would face justice. Among the indicted were 2 retired admirals from the 1960s, one of whom had served as a national security advisor. In the same session, Congress unanimously passed a resolution to restore Captain James Harrison's honor. The House Speaker read aloud, "His name will be engraved on the USS Arizona Memorial, alongside the 1,177 comrades who fell. But history will remember, Harrison fought not only an external enemy, but a betrayal from within." On the day of the resolution, thousands gathered under the white dome of the Arizona Memorial at Pearl Harbor. A special commemoration was held, attended by naval leaders, victims' families, and the public. A new gleaming bronze plaque was unveiled, inscribed with Captain James Harrison, 1900-1941, executed in secret now remembered. Mark stood beside Rachel, eyes fixed on his grandfather's name, restored after 45 years of erasure. As the bugle played taps, many veterans shed tears. One whispered, "He's finally back with us." International news outlets broadcast the ceremony live. For many Americans, this was a historic moment, justice delayed but delivered. The image of Harrison's family, bowing before the memorial, became a symbol of the long fight to uncover the truth. On television, a congressman stated, "We're not just restoring one man's honor, but affirming that democracy only survives when it dares to face its past, no matter how painful." After the ceremony, Mark received an official letter from the Navy. James Harrison was posthumously promoted to Rear Admiral. The letter read, "His sacrifice is a testament to ultimate loyalty to truth and country." Rachel, watching the long line of people laying flowers at the memorial, said softly, 45 years of cover-up, and in just a few months of exposure, everything has changed." Mark nodded. He once wrote, "If I'm gone, ask about this morning's order." We asked. And now all of America has the answer. Justice came late, but it came. And Captain James Harrison's name, instead of being buried under the ashes of the Arizona, is now etched into America's historical memory as an enduring symbol. The sky was clear over Pearl Harbor. Mark stood silently before the USS Arizona Memorial, where the new bronze plaque bearing Captain James Harrison's name gleamed under the Hawaiian sun. The inscription alongside it, "Executed in secret, now remembered," stood as proof that the truth could not be buried forever. Around him, crowds of visitors, veterans, students, and victims' families quietly laid wreaths. To them, Harrison was no longer just a missing captain. He became a symbol of loyalty and truth, a man who stood against wrongful orders, even at the cost of his life. The media called it belated justice and a turning point in U.S. naval history. Congress passed resolutions to expand declassification. Newly released files clarified Pearl Harbor's truth, ignored radar warnings, retracted alerts, and Silent Harbor as a systematic plan. In one newly declassified document, a chilling line emerged: Silent Harbor assets to be reassigned under Cold War protocols. New designation pending. This suggested the network that eliminated Harrison didn't end in 1941, but persisted through the Cold War under another codename. Rachel skimmed the file, eyes flashing with concern. "Mark, it seems Silent Harbor's legacy is longer than we thought." Mark replied tersely, "At least its beginning is now exposed, and Harrison's name will never be erased from history again." As the memorial ceremony ended, the political storm hadn't subsided, but for Mark, the journey was complete. His grandfather was no longer a missing number, but a man who stood for his comrades, truth and honor. Rachel placed her hand on the stone, saying softly, "Your grandfather didn't vanish. They just tried to erase him from history." Mark looked at the newly engraved name, his voice resolute. "Now his name will live forever." The story of Captain James Harrison at Pearl Harbor, and the 45-year fight for his vindication, is not just a historical tragedy, but a vital reminder for American society today. We see clearly, from the ignored radar evidence, Harrison's detention and execution on December 9, 1941, and the intervention of defense industrial conglomerates to conceal failure and turn it into profit. The truth was buried not for lack of evidence, but because those in power deliberately twisted history to protect their interests. This is a direct lesson for today's generation. In a democracy, transparency and accountability are not just ideals, but essential for survival. When Congress restored Harrison's honor and engraved his name on the USS Arizona Memorial, the American public proved that social pressure, a free press, and the courage of those who speak out can overturn a conspiracy once thought unassailable. In today's America, amid concerns about information cover-ups, political corruption, or corporate overreach, we must remember that the truth can be delayed, but never erased. Harrison's lesson is this: question opaque decisions, support investigative journalism, and protect warning voices, however inconvenient. Only then can we prevent a modern silent harbor from recurring and ensure that loyalty and courage no longer come at the cost of death in the shadows. Thank you for joining us in uncovering the truth about Captain James Harrison and his enduring legacy. Subscribe to our channel to follow more hidden historical stories, and we'll see you in the next video.